Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, young men and young women. All right, well, I want to start, okay? I only got dressed like this so the people in Israel should have the hana'ah of what I looked like in New York 4 months ago. I was going to put in the request for formal attire, but Oren would have killed me and everybody else would have killed me. Because this is formal attire.
The same suit?
What? Same suit, same tie,
Was it what?
different shoes? No.
You can take it.
I didn't use it much. We're not getting into that, Marie. If I said yes, you'll have to take me as a patient. Okay.
No, I just feel sorry for Diane.
This has been a labor of love. I just can't tell you how much enjoyment I've had out of this. The people that live here and were at the reunion know how successful it was. Many people know how much work I put into this, but it was easy. Number one, I was retired. Secondly, I love
I'm
the
retired
sport.
as of this week.
Oh, Mazel Tov, about time.
Join the club.
Now she has no access to her drugs. She's a pharmacist. The reunion in New York was great, but I had to have one in Israel because this is the place I really love, and I love the people here. I was very lucky that I started in first grade in Flatbush, so I knew 44 of our graduates who made Aliyah to the high school, and then I knew the other 66 who were in the high school as well. And unfortunately, 6 of us of our chevra are no longer here, but they will be remembered in a little while. Also, the spouses that are here, thank you so much for coming. We have no those in case it gets to that situation. Those that remember know those from the 60s, you know what we're talking about. Okay, before I do anything else, I know, I was here early. First of all, I have something for Oren Ariella, another drink in case anybody wants, okay? But more importantly, they gave us their house, they provided the refreshments, they gave us a friendship, and on behalf of all of us, we have not the rubber band, I need the rubber band, no, I'm just kidding. We have a gift for Oren Ariella, please. And to take visual with you, yes.
Go to the wine festival.
So enjoy it and use it well. And later on, before we leave, you'll open it up so we can see what it is. And this is the gift that I forgot to give Rabbi Eliach at the reunion. So fortunately, I'll tell you what happened.
What about the hat?
What?
Did you find the hat?
We never found the hat.
Really?
Rabbi Eliach lost his hat at the reunion. Why would I want to steal his black hat?
Keep your hat on.
But whatever it is.
Mishgiachis.
Oh yeah, exactly. So we have regards from a number of classmates who specifically wanted to send regards. Lois Love, Lois Exelberg, Arthur Green, Bonnie Richmond, Eloise Lax, Elliot Horowitz, and Hetty Krause, and Michael Exelberg. So they all send regards. They really miss everybody. They would love to come. Michael Exelberg is on a cruise right now, somewhere near Norway. He couldn't make it, but he definitely wanted to come.
That's the best excuse I've ever heard.
It is true, but it's true. Michael Exelberg.
Lois Love and Michael Exelberg.
Are no longer Lois and Michael.
Right.
There's Lois. Michael? There's Lois Love? Michael Exelberg. But that's been a while. Okay. I could not locate Herschel Dachman. In other words, I called him, I spoke to him once, but he never responded, so he's not here tonight. And Howie Rosner has a wedding. He'll be here a little bit late, but he's coming from Haifa area anyway. Okay, so without further ado, let's go on to the program. You will also, now, with everything else, your bags downstairs and pictures. I put together, we never got a high school picture. We had a yearbook, we never had a class picture. I put together and I created a class picture. So you will get each a copy. This is not
Of how we look today?
of how we looked years ago, and not as good as we look today. But we'll have to do, suffice. Those that went into elementary school, a number of us, will also get an elementary school picture in case you lost yours from 1962. There are other things in there which I'll discuss afterwards. But we do have a formal program similar to what we had in New York, because I don't think it should be any less enjoyable over here. So the welcome is done, and now I want to ask Debbie to come up and say the tefillah for Eretz Yisrael. You're right, 100%. You're absolutely right.
אבינו שבשמיים, צור ישראל וגואלו, ברך את מדינת ישראל ראשית צמיחת בירתנו. הגן עליה באגרת חסדך, ופרוס עליה סופת שלומך, ושלח אורך ועמיתך בראשיה שריה ויועציה, ותקנם בעצה טובה מלפניך. חזק את ידי מגיני ארץ קודשנו, והנחילם אלוהינו ישועה, ועטרת ניצחון תעטרם, ונתת שלום בארץ ושמחת עולם מיושביה. ואת אחינו כל בית ישראל, חד נא בכל ארצות פזוריהם, ותוליכם מהירם קוממיות לציון עירך ולירושלים משכן שמך, ככתוב בתורת משה עבדיך. אם יהיה נידחך בקצה השמיים, משם יקבצך אדוני אלוהיך, ומשם ייקחך. והביאך אדוני אלוהינו אלוהיך אל הארץ אשר ירשו אבותיך וירשת, והיטיבך והרבך מאבותיך. ומל אדוני אלוהיך את לבבך ואת לבב זרעך, לאהבה את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך למען חמך. ויחד לבבינו לאהבה וליראה את שמך, ולשמור את כל דברי תורתך, ושלח לנו מהרה בן דוד משיח צדקך, לבדוק ומחכה את קץ ישועתך. הופע בהדר גאון עוזך על כל יושבי תבל ארצך, ויאמר כל אשר נשמה בו, אדוני אלוהי ישראל, מלך ומלכותו בכל משלה. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much. Next page afterwards, we have the prayer for America. Sheila, Garbati Silver, please.
I'm only here 5 months, so just...
That's why you still can say for America. You haven't passed the year yet.
הנותן תשועה למלכים וממשלה לנסיכים, מלכותו מלכות כל עולמים. הפוצע את דוד עבדו מקרב רעה, הנותן בים דרך ומים עזים נתיבה. הוא יברך את הנשיא ואת משנהו. כל יועציהם ושריהם לעשות טובות עמנו ובכל ישראל אחינו בימיהם ובימינו תיוושע יהודה וישראל ישכון לבטח. ובא לציון גואל וכן יהי רצון ונאמר אמן.
Apology accepted.
No, I don't think so.
הנשיאה הבאה?
No, I don't
Prayer,
think so.
Tefillah with Sahal, Miriam.
It must be 6 now.
You can say it any way you want. Go on.
But I get a better picture of you if you
אברהם,
stand.
יצחק ויעקב ויברך את חיילי צבא ההגנה לישראל העומדים על משמר ארצנו בערי אלוהינו מגבול הלבנון ועד מדבר מצרים, מן הים הגדול עד לבוא הערבה, ביבשה, באוויר ובים. ייתן אדוני את אויבינו הקמים עלינו ניגפים לפניהם. הקדוש ברוך הוא ישמור ויציל את חיילינו מכל צרה וצוקה, מכל נגע ומחלה, וישלח ברכה והצלחה מכל מעשה ידיהם. ידבר שונאינו תחתיהם, ויעטרם בכתר ישועה ובטרת ניצחון. ויוקם בהם הכתוב, כי אדוני אלוהיכם ההולך עמכם, להילחם לכם עם אויביכם, להושיע אתכם, ונאמר אמן.
Shady, you say the prayer.
שיר המעלות, אשרי כל יראי אדוני ההולך בדרכיו. הגיע כפיך כי תאכל, אשריך וטוב לה. אשתך כגפן פוריה בירכתי ביתך, בניך כשתילי זיתים סביב לשולחניך. הנה כי כן יבורך גבר יראי אדוני. וברכך אדוני מציון, וראה בטוב ירושלים כל ימי חייך, וראה בנים לבניך, שלום על ישראל.
The last thing we're doing is the Kel Mullet for our 6 graduates who are no longer with us. Unfortunately, I'd asked Oren to recite the Kel Mullet, and I'll ask everybody to stand as well.
El male rachamim, shochen bameromim. Hametzei menucha nechon al kanefei hashchina. V'malot kidoshim u'tiorim, kizor rakia mazhirim. את נשמות חברינו למחזור בתיכון, אליהו בתש, יחיאל בלוק, חיה גולדברג, חיה גוטליב, מנחם הופרט ומשה רדינסקי שהלכו לעולמם. בעבור שאנחנו חבריהם מתפללים בעד עילוי נשמותם, בגן עדן תהא מנוחתם. לכן בעל הרחמים יסתירם בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמותיהם. אדוני הוא נחלתם, וינוחו בשלום על משכבם, ונאמר אמן.
Please be seated, just for 2 minutes. So, we're basically done with the program, but afterwards we're going to come downstairs to have something to eat. And again, I want to thank Ariella and Oren for the hospitality, for the food, and for the convenience, and for the comfort we have over here. When we come back upstairs, as we're eating, etc., I am asking for everyone to take a few minutes out to talk about the lives in Israel, why they made Aliyah here, and one anecdote about high school, if you can remember that far back. Or if you don't want to speak, you do not have to speak. No one's mechuyav, no one has to speak. But it's just a similar touch to what we did in New York. Okay? Again, it's can't tell you how great this is. I can't tell you what a pleasure this is. What nachas I've had seeing you guys. I mean, and even, you know, it's like I know chevra of chevra. I know Joel's widow Eileen for many years back. David Gertz, Adina's husband, went to YU with me. Vel Davin, the young Yeshiva of Flatbush, with me. Tzvi is my accountant's brother. More so. My oldest son's kindergarten teacher's brother-in-law. That's the yichus. That's the yichus. Serious. It's just great to see everybody and great to share in the simcha. One of the reasons I really did this was to allow people to reconnect. 25 years ago, like David said years ago, there were many issues why we couldn't come to the reunion in New York. But now a lot of us some of us are retired, some of us have more time on our hands, and some of us really are getting to the stage in life where we really want to reconnect to what we were as young people, youngsters, even though we're not that old in the sense of spirit, but in age-wise, we're getting on. And it's just nice to know that I can't tell you how many connections there have been made already in the brief time when I started this thing on March 5th of 2015. It was Purim time. I figured, you know what? Let me send out emails to those that I have information.
You were trying.
Flatbush, I was totally out of it. Flatbush had a 2000 and a 2010 directory of the graduates. So between phone numbers and email addresses, I was able to find, let's say 70-75% of the class. Then someone knew this and someone knew that and knew this and knew that. And finally, Hetty Krause gave me the last contact from whatchamacallit for Michael Birnbaum, who still is in the air somewhere. We have no idea where he is, in Santa Barbara. But his sister graduated 6-7 years after we did, so I was able to connect with her, and she gave me his information. That was number 104. I knew about the other 6 who had passed away. It was a labor of love. When you see the memory books, the only word I can think about is kvel. You're going to get so much satisfaction and enjoyment of reading how successful the entire class has been. And it was just phenomenal to read where people were in high school, elementary school, and where they were in their formative years, in their working years, and now where they are today. And it's beautiful. We had a phenomenal grade, ultra successful in every which way, and I'm very proud of being a graduate of Yeshiva of Flatbush, especially class of 1966. We have a lot to be proud about, and thank you all for coming. This is more than I ever expected. It's just phenomenal. So let's get started. All right, can we have your attention, please? One of the things we did in the New York reunion was had a number of people speaking, but I couldn't have 66 people speaking because it would have been the whole night, and I couldn't afford the rental of the place. However, Ora's not charging me rent yet, so we can start doing this. And what we'd like to do is go around the room. Anybody who'd like to speak can speak. If someone does not want to speak, there's no chiyuv to speak at all. There's no pressure on here whatsoever. Basically talking about your aliyah to Israel, why, if you've written in the book, there's no reason to repeat yourself as far as what you do, etc. Whatever you want to say, basically. But
And
I'd
where's
like to
this
ask,
going? And you're
what is-
assuming that
okay.
we remember what we wrote in the book.
Miriam, with you, I assume, hey,
You're assuming we remember why we came up with that.
And where are these immortal words going to?
okay, so what's happening is, let me just tell you.
this room.
Downstairs, when you leave, or right before you leave, we have a bag for everybody.
Oh, that's great.
In the bag, for those people that are not were not in New York, you'll have a memory book. You'll have a book that Rabbi Eliach wrote in the read about his life in Yerushalayim and until he left Eretz Yisrael. Avar Shelo Avar. Hasidic Tales of the Holocaust by Yafa Eliach, my all-time favorite book, and I got it for everybody. I wanted everybody to share it. You have a book on Pirkei Avot, because Rabbi Rosner's parak behind, and I want to make sure he's caught up. You have some other things as well, and for the women there's Sherry Herring, and for the men there's Crown Royal. The badges are somewhere in the door of the Israeli post office with the other memory books. And Oren and I have been conversing on this for the longest time about this.
We solved the problem.
We solved the problem without finding the books. But everybody has a memory book, so it's legit. You'll have a tremendous enjoyment. There are a lot of things in the memory book you might not understand at all. You have my email address. I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have. Seriously. Some of them are very funny, some of them are my sarcasm, which, especially the last page, I put in the reviews already of the book. So if you want to know why I put it, it was just, that took 5 minutes. That was easy. But then again, those things are easy for me. I just go off the top of my head. That's it. So without further ado, we will start with the host and hostess to tell us a little bit about their life here. I want to put you on the spot. And then please, anything you want to say, B'kitzur, slow, because it's, for me, I don't care. I'm on vacation. I'm retired. You can say as long as you like. Or an Ariella might have said. And it's Thursday. It's right before the weekend, so what's the problem?
I said Thursday is the day to do it.
You did it.
Everybody feels the weekend is imminent and we're relaxed.
You can stand, you can be seated, it doesn't really matter.
I won't repeat my overly long section of the memory book, but I will talk a little about Aliyah and then maybe about high school. A couple of words about a couple of people. I came here for the first time with the Zamir Chorale to sing in the Zimriyah. Stanley Sperber.
Maestro.
I was with him last night at rehearsal for the Bach B minor mass next week. But we came to sing, And then the 6-Day War broke out in June. We were supposed to come in July. And nobody knew what to do, what would happen. And we were trying to organize to come and volunteer. And then the war was over and we came. But it was a very special time here. And a lot of those people who were on that trip are here and have been here for a long time. Ariella and I met during that summer. And then I came for my junior year of college here. I told them they have no offerings in Jewish philosophy, and my major was philosophy, and they said, okay, that makes sense to us. We got married at the end of the junior year, and I went back for my senior year. By the time I had spent the year here, I knew I wanted to stay. It was infectious, there was enthusiasm. I felt that I had come home for the first time, even though I had never been here till age 19. And basically I never looked back. So that's the story of the Aliyah. Everything in the middle is written in the book. To go back to high school, I was thinking, I told Barry, about two of the people who were not with us, both of whom were musicians, and with both of whom I had musical experiences and partnerships. First is Mike Hoffert. Some of you may remember that Donnie Matman and Mike Hoffert and me used to sing.
In the hall, the stairwell.
In the hallway, in the stairwell. Not only there are times they put us up on the stage, not for long. But Michael was also a good friend, and he introduced me to jazz. I had never heard, I knew nothing about it, and Mike was an aficionado. He took me to a place in Canarsie in Brooklyn to hear Cal Jader. For him, Cal Jader, he was a vibraphone player, a very good one. Mike knew he was playing in Brooklyn. He took me, my eyes were open wide. Mike said, we have to have a band. I'm the drummer, you're the pianist, then we got a guitarist. We were terrible. We didn't go anywhere, we didn't perform. But he got me interested in things that I only came to fruition with in the last couple of years. There's the disc here of jazz, which I recorded with two jazz combos. The discs here, they are both the jazz disc, and there's an older one of Chazanut and Yiddish songs. They are here as gifts to each and every one of you.
Wow.
Please take them, feel free, they're here for you. And those of you that have brothers and sisters that I know, Rena and Naomi, and there may be others, please take one for your brother or sister.
Are you playing there or singing?
I'm singing.
Singing.
I early on came to the conclusion that I'm not such a good pianist, but I can. Yeah, people
Inspired me. I started playing piano. Really?
Didn't Rosalind used to sing with you also?
That's right.
You
Yeah,
left the
that's right. With Mike
band.
Birdman. We were something for.
Yes.
We sang Dream. We knew one song.
That's it.
Dream.
Not bad. Let's hear it.
No, because Dream. Howard's gonna kill the CD. He's gonna kill it.
So that was Mike Hoffert. Mike came to visit me when we lived up in Bayit Vagan in the early 70s. And then he was killed not a few years later. I miss him. He was my mentor in a big section of music that became very important to me. Joel Block. Joel Block was a musician, and he became an impresario. In the early 70s, we were both here, and we sang together in the Jerusalem Chamber Choir for years. And he encouraged me. He told me, Oren, you have to sing. You sound like a young Herman Prey. I didn't know who Herman Prey was. But Joel was an instigator, like Mike. And here they are, two out of the 6 people that I miss, and that made a big contribution to how I developed at that early stage. So that's my.
Terrific, thank you. I'm gonna take that from you, because I want you to enjoy that. I'm gonna take this from you. Because I want you to like it. Okay. Before we how do I do this? Before we continue on with Howard, I want to tell you one anecdote. So in the senior year, Oren and Donnie and Mike are playing having a concert, and they're on the stage, and the last song was Ani Ma'amin. That's what Oren said, Ani Ma'amin. Sam Richter is playing the piano. Sam has no idea what he wants to be played. Oren goes down and says, stage Rishma, I believe. At which point, Sam said, oh, now I believe. And then they started singing. That's one anecdote like that. See, you're on.
I thought you were going this way, no?
See, you're on.
Too late.
Oh, well.
All right. I also don't remember what I wrote in the, but Barry reminded me before. He said he enjoyed something that I had said about Rabbi Eliyahu. So maybe I'll just repeat that as far as coming to Israel. About a year or two before we came to Israel, I got a call. Rabbi Eliyahu wants to speak to you. I was principal of Hafter, of the junior high school in New York, in the Five Towns, and he called me and he said that he wants to speak to me. All right, I come in and he says, listen, I'm not getting any younger. Remember, this was 35 years ago. I think he remained another 30 years or so, 25. But he says, I'm not getting any younger. I need somebody to help me with teachers. And two guys, Harvey Bachman and who was the other one? Maybe Vel Pasternak.
No.
Vel,
Walowski.
Joel.
Joel Walowski.
Joel Walowski.
As in Marsha and David Krieger.
Yes.
Joel's still in Flatbush, if I'm not.
Yes, there he is.
He's here a lot.
That's his life.
Marsha's sister is here, and
Yes.
I meet them, I see them.
Yeah, my
Yeah.
brother's in touch with Joel.
And his sister
He
lives here.
retired.
Are you retired? So anyway, they greeted me when I came in, and they stood at the door listening, apparently, because they knew what transpired inside. So anyway, he told me, why don't you come work over here in Flatbush? And I said, I'm sorry, we're moving to Israel. And we have it all planned, my wife Chaya and I are on our way. And he said, well, you can push it off a little while. Push it off. I said, no. He says, why not? I said, well, because I think Rabbi Eliyahu, you did a very good job teaching us how important it is to be here. He was speechless. And when I came out, Bachman and Walowski said, you said no? Did you realize? I really didn't realize what he meant. In other words, he was talking about to replace in the future, maybe. But thank God, I mean, as I say, he remained many, many more years, and I didn't regret for a moment coming here. Actually, the big influence, I think, was my sixth grade teacher. My wife Chaya keeps reminding me because she taught along with him many years later in YCQ when she was in America. He was a gung-ho, even though he was living in America, but a gung-ho Zionist. He had been in the camps. He would tell stories. Sixth graders love to hear these stories, how he jumped off trains and jumped on trains and on Nazis, all kinds of stories he had. And also about Israel. And he forced all of us to read the book Exodus, which had just come out. And it made a tremendous impression upon me. And I saw the movie afterwards many years. It may sound silly almost, but it had...
You were hiding this well back then.
What was the name of the teacher?
But his real name, I found out afterwards, was in Einstein, Dr. Oshier, but he called himself Dr. Egozi. And years later, Chaim comes back from work one day, and at YCQ, I was teaching, I think, in Ramaz at the time, and she says, there's a teacher I'm teaching with who knows you. I said, who? She says, I think he went by the name Oshier by then. I don't think he was a Gozi still, yeah? Anyway, he says, sure, he remembers Tzvi Rosner, sixth grade, with him, and then he says, whatever became of him? and she said, he's a teacher. He's a teacher. He was disappointed somewhat, I guess. But I never met him afterwards. But he was the influence at the time for coming. You asked about an anecdote. There's one cute one, I think, with our principal, Dr. Sidney Z. Lieberman, Zichrono Livracha. Just forgive me for the story I'm going to tell, though. I remember...
I don't forgive you. Shut up.
Rosner raised the altitude of that tie. Remember that? On the top, raised the first. Anyway, well, maybe I should skip a few of the stories with him. I had a lot of dealings with him because when I was the president of GO, the SGO, I was mostly by him and not in the classroom. That's why I ran. But I remember one time he came into the class, somebody had just thrown a chair or something, and he had walked by, and David Thau, remember David Thau?
That was only in our,
Remember him?
he was only in our freshman year of high
He was
school.
only, this was in our freshman
Year of high school.
Room 1424, Shira probably remembers the room. I don't remember the room, it was the class 1424. Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, David Thor, he was a very funny guy. Anyway, he
Examine the cupboards. Used to, when you come to your house,
We knew him from
you used to
elementary
come
school.
and look at all the boxes to see if they're kosher.
See if it's kosher.
Yeah. He
Only
was
freshman year.
he was a religious
You
guy.
got it.
Freshman year.
Anyway,
There was the Freda Silva was also in a year then. You remember Freda
that's right.
Silva?
Sure.
She's in the gush.
Oh, she's
Howard, you're not running for president. Let's go quick.
Oh, okay.
Come on.
Sorry. Anyway, a chair was thrown in the classroom, and Rabbi Lieberman came storming in, and he starts asking questions, and he got to Thor, and somehow he decided David Thor was the culprit. And he walks out with Thor, "Follow me," he says. "I always get my man." And I remember I said to him, "Not this time, Rabbi. It was me." That's the story.
Elliot.
Everybody's talking about Rabbi Eliach. So the only real thing I had with Rabbi Eliach was I was probably the only GO member. I was the secretary. I was impeached by Rabbi Eliach because Iris Mazursky was doing my typing lessons. I never went to typing, and Mr. Dollar reported me to Rabbi Eliach, and I was impeached. That's why I never came to those last meetings.
That was your excuse.
Anyway, I never wrote anything in the book. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Thanks for forgiveness.
You didn't have
Okay.
anything to forget?
But anyway, I came to Israel for the first time after the 6-Day War, as probably a lot of people did, and that's when I got the bug. And came for the summer. I worked in Har Sofim as a volunteer. Then that was the summer, that was 67, 68, 69, I came back for the junior year abroad. And we had many people from our class who were there. My two best friends growing up were Joel Block and Joe Kalushkin. We were the threesome. We were, since the age of 6, we were like inseparable. And of course, after hearing about Joel, it really put a dent in my life. It was terrible trauma. But since then I've been blessed, and I've been appointed to be the sandak of 2 of Eileen's grandchildren,
Named for Joel.
named for Joel, and gotten brachas at all the weddings. So I always feel that Joel is still with me, and thank God for that. Anyway, so I came from my junior year abroad, and I went back to Yeshiva University, finished college, came back to Israel, went to Hebrew University studying sociology. I met my lovely wife, who was very lovely for about a year.
Tikva.
Tikva.
Think about it.
Used to say tickle tickle for me.
And we managed to make it for a couple of years,
A lot of years.
a lot of years. But the problem is I couldn't get a get for 13 years. I was in the Surah Get, so it was a little difficult, but thank God we managed, and now have a significant other, thank God. I have 3 kids, 9 grandkids, great kids, all here in Eretz Yisrael, and it's really special to see all these people I haven't seen for so many years. Sorry I couldn't get to see the rest of them in America. But maybe we could get together again another 10 years.
Barry is Barry.
No,
Barry.
it's-
Very
Make
We'll,
a note.
we'll talk about the next stage.
the 100.
Eileen.
So actually, even though I'm not a graduate or I never attended Yeshiva of Flatbush, I actually went to public school, I know a lot of stories and anecdotes. Why? Because Joel would regale us at every Shabbos table he was at. Not only do I know stories for Flatbush, all the children know. He had 6 children. Joel did not live to see any of them married. And Baruch Hashem, we have many, many grandchildren. I don't say the number, don't want to invite the Ayin Ran. Hakupa Adayin Ptucha. So one story I will share with you. Joel was a horrible student. I'm sure this is not a great revelation. He had 0 interest in studies. He mostly sat in the classroom humming one of the 60 operas that he knew by heart. So whenever a teacher would hear a buzzing noise, wasn't quite sure, and it could have been anything from Traviata to Turandot to Aida, the Triumphal March. By the way, some of you, I'm sure he dragged to visit Esther Levine. He took you. So either you learned to love it or hate it, but at least you knew what genre it was. To this day, I still have over 10,000 of his opera recordings because the children refused to part from them. And when he died, they all said, no, Ima, don't. No, we're going to take them when we get married. No, not true. So instead, silly Eileen went to IKEA and spent over 1,000 shekels to purchase these huge boxes so that I could at least store these records. And that's where they are. They're still stored in my house. So one story I'll share with you was with Joseph Tolushkin. He was a terrible student. There was going to be a Gemara test. He didn't know anything. He had no idea what they had been learning all year. So he went to Joseph's house, and Rabbi Tolushkin spent all night preparing them for this exam. And thank God it snowed. And a snow day. So then Rabbi Tolushkin had the whole next day and the whole next night to prepare, and Joel passed by the skin of his teeth. God bless Rabbi Tolushkin, and Mrs. Tolushkin served all night orange juice and crackers, which to the day Joel died, he remembered those orange juice and crackers. So, with the children, here's an interesting story. When the first one got married, several years after Joel died, and then Baruch Hashem, she got pregnant, I decided, no, Barur me'elav, mistake, that she will give the name to her father. So I had made a point of saying, you don't have to give the first name, Yechiel, not kol kach moderni, but you can give the second name so that when the child has an Aliyah Torah, they'll hear that name. So the first one was named Nachshon, because he was born on Pesach, El Chai. Okay, Ima, isn't that wonderful? It's El Chai, Yechiel, Hafuch. So I said, you know what? I don't like Parshanut Rashi with Shemot. Either you say the name or you don't. So then I decided afterwards I would be more aggressive about my request. So as then the next one got pregnant, I said, you know, I would really like to have Abba's name Yechiel. So then there was a discussion. Well, Yechiel, I said, no, that's the name that he had when he got called up to the Torah, Yechiel Eliezer. That's his name. The fact that here everyone called him Yoel was simply because it was a mistake. Joel, Yoel, and he just left the mistake ride. But his name is Yechiel Eliezer, and I even explained at one of the Aliyot Lekever the importance of that name and who he was named for and so forth. So, next one, okay, we got Amiyad Yechiel, Yafé Meod. We got Ivri Yechiel, Yofi. Guy Yechiel, or Yoter Yafé, and then we get Aniyam Avia. Not good. So then we have another one. So I'm saying, okay, this is Barur that he's going to give Yechiel, and then he comes up with some name that. One, to tell you the upset was one morning I woke up and I was going over all the grandchildren's names, and I couldn't remember his name. So my son came up to me and he said, well, you know, are you disappointed in the name? Well, now you can't change it. So I said, no, it's a beautiful name. And he says, you understand the mashmaut of Yoav Yisrael, as Yisrael kolel zeh v'zeh. I said, you know, once it kolel zeh v'zeh v'zeh, it's a little kolel. It's like advertising, which is my field, which if your advertising is reaching out to everyone, it's reaching out to no one. So, so that's like a side story. But when I think about the children, I think Joel would be so happy because he's the one who brought us to Israel. When he was 13, we just celebrated Yud Bet Av, 30 years in Eretz Yisrael. When he was 13, he decided he's making Aliyah. He fell in love. He came on some bar mitzvah trip. He fell in love with the country. And when he and I dated, we began dating 20 years ago, I'll say, when I was 18, I won't tell you my age, he said to me, you know, I only go out with girls who are willing to move to Israel. So I said, okay, that sounds fine. I had no idea what he was talking about. And when the 5th child was born, Ranan, he said, Eileen, die po be'Artzot Habrit. I've had it here. We're moving. And that year we moved. Ranan was 13 months old, and we moved, and we had Nati, our youngest, in Israel. He's our only Saba. And when we celebrated 30 years, I gathered all the children and explained the whole history and Abba's love of Eretz Yisrael and how we got here. He's the guy who comes off the plane and kisses the ground. He's the guy who starts speaking Hebrew instantaneously. He's the guy who won't allow the Jerusalem Post in the house. You can only buy a Hebrew newspaper. We only listen to Hebrew news. He corrects Israelis dikduk. Thank God for Yeshiva of Flatbush and Mossad. He loved it here. We used to go everywhere. We traveled everywhere with the kids. They loved it. They hated it. They all had to get in the car. We're going on a tiyul. You're gonna love it. We hated Abba. No, you're gonna love it. And that was our lives here for all the years that he was living here. And when I said to the kids, it's because of Abba that we're here. And look, all of you are living in Eretz Yisrael. All of your children were born in Eretz Yisrael. It's dor acharei dor. Toda rabba la'Abba. And that's all I'll say.
Thank you very much. Debbie?
Just a short recap of why I came to Israel, and that's basically because my parents are Holocaust survivors, and I myself was born in a DP camp, and I think that was very, I don't know how the word in English is, but it's mechonen in my life, and I always knew that I had to live in Israel because that was the solution for the Jewish people. It was just very clear to me. So the first chance I had, I came, and that's it. The rest is history. But I'd just like to connect with what Warren said. I happen to be friendly with Mike Hoffert's brother. Yes, Mike Hoffert's brother. Mike Hoffert's brother lives in Kfar Saba. His second marriage is to Batsheva, formerly Weinberg. If you know who she is, she's the mother of Dror Weinberg, who was killed, and she's a lot in the media, you see. So he's married to Batsheva. And I did approach him. I asked him when Barry started this whole business, I asked him if he had any pictures or anything to contribute, he said he didn't, so, I don't know, but that's,
Is he a musician?
He's not a musician, he's an opera aficionado, he's a social worker, an ex-social worker, but opera's his thing. He actually wrote some books on opera even.
Give him Joel's record collection.
If I could sneak it out, if I could lift it,
Oh, he's a cousin also, he's a cousin also, yeah. So, that's how that connects. Another friend of ours is Menachem Friedman, Professor Menachem Friedman, who also from the media, is the researcher of the Charedim, v'chulei v'chulei. He is the sister of Rivka Friedman, the brother. Rivka Friedman.
She's our teacher. She lived in Beit Bagas.
With the green nail paint. Exactly.
I saw her on
He was at our house last week, and I told him that we were having this reunion, and he said, please mention her name. It was just very important for him to have her mentioned, and I guess to have her memory be alive.
Abby wrote about her in the memory book.
Just think how young she must have been.
Yes,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
She was facing us. We were
We were
not easy.
We were
She was tough though, she
Came in.
She was tough, she was
Milo
really tough,
Kara.
No, I remember we would see the light in her room, I guess she rented a room in a house on East 7th or something, and we think she's probably sitting there, Also, Yocheved Rachelsman was also single when she came and she had to deal with us. And I happened to have been friendly with her also at some point, she lived in Givatayim.
Rivka was very accomplished there.
Oh, Debbie.
Yes.
Debbie, we were also friends.
Miss Melange, she was,
Who? Fisher. I was, yes. I know, Cindy Fisher. Markovich was the shadchan of my friends.
Fuzzy.
And in Barilan, I always used to meet, I met Yoel, what's his name, Edelstein.
Yoav.
Yoav Edelstein taught
He was
Barilan. Genizi taught in Barilan.
Yeah, I'm gonna
I
say
had
back
her
to
teacher.
Genizi. I have a memory of Genizi.
And, איך קוראים לו, Gruzman.
still.
Yeah, so I used to, Mordechai Friedman also from, he was in Haifa.
I worked with him for about 25 years.
So, that's where all these connections, all these, but I did my share, I mentioned Rivka Friedman.
Rabbi Shach also.
Rabbi Shach.
I worked with him also.
He also lived in Biden.
That's
Right.
We're going to hear brief messages from Evelyn and from David, who are at the New York reunion. So, briefly want to say something.
Yeah, well, I didn't speak of the New York one,
Mhm.
and I'm not an Israeli, but we'll get to that in a while. Everybody mentioned principles, and I just remember stories about each one of the ones you mentioned. First off, Rabbi Eliach, if it weren't for him, I wouldn't be at Flatbush, and I wouldn't be sitting here with all my classmates. When I was in 8th grade, and we were all getting ready to go to high school, my parents registered me to Central. And they said that's what they were able to afford. Yeshiva of Flatbush was way too expensive for them, and that's where I was going to go. And I was fine. There were other girls in my class who were going to Central, and I was the good girl that I was. My parents said go to Central. I was going to Central. And my 8th grade teacher at the time was so thrilled that I was going to Central. He was this man with his long beard, Rabbi Azi, and he was thrilled. I'm going to Central. This is really wonderful. Few weeks go by, and Rabbi Eliach gives my parents a call. Mr. and Mrs. Mermelstein, we haven't heard from you about your daughter coming to Flatbush. And my mom goes, well, we registered her to Central. What do you mean you register her to Central? That's what we're able to afford. You're charging way too much money in Flatbush, and we're Holocaust survivors. We don't have that much. We can't afford Flatbush. So tell me, how much do you want to pay? And I guess my parents gave them whatever number, and he said sold. And I ended up in Flatbush, and that's why I'm at this reunion. So that was my Rabbi Eliach story. And of course, Rabbi Eliach, who wanted me so much, made sure that I was going to be in the A class. So I went through suffering a year of the A class. What'd you get in the test? 98. Ha, beat you, got a 99. And I said, no, this is not for me. This is not for me. When they put me back into the A class in sophomore year, when we got our class placements, I went crying to my mother and I said, I don't want to be there. Call up the school, tell them I can't be there anymore. And my mom said, you're a big girl now, you handle it. Well, here I was going in to Rabbi Eliach's office again, and I go, Rabbi Eliach, I can't do it. I don't want to be in the A class. He said, you don't want to be in the A class? I said, no, I don't want to be in the A class. He said, okay, I'll put you into the B class, but you're sure? I'm 100% sure. So here comes my Joel Braverman story. Braverman used to come and read all the grades. First of all, I mean, A class and B class, I know with the girls, I was in the same class because we were mixed. So I didn't feel like I was missing something, whatever. And I got to meet like a lot of other nice people in the B class. But Robert Braverman comes in, or Mr. Braverman, or whatever he is, and he comes in and he's reading off grades to everybody, and he comes to me, and he says, oh, Miss Mermelstein, keep up the good work, we'll put you back in the A class. So that's my Joel Braverman story. And then we were talking about Zippy. So my Zippy story, I don't know if you guys remember, I think I was still in the A class at the time, but we were in Miss Francois's art class. Oh. And if you remember, there was like this trough, where you washed all this stuff and all. and some of the beautiful, I think it was A-class student, stopped up the drains in the trough and made paper boats, and as the water was running, yeah, sounds like something you would have done, Ori. And the boats just started sailing along, and going over the waterfall. And Miss Franzblau has a fit. And she calls in Lieberman, and he comes in there with his real, bulldog kind of face, and he's really, really angry. And he goes, "What's happening in this class?" And we're just sitting there, we're angels. And he takes a look at what's happening. And he puts his hands over his mouth. You see he's going to crack up laughing. And he walked out of the classroom and then walked in and said, "I don't want this done ever again." So that's a legal way. As far as me not being in Israel, we be Mizrach in any event. My daughter lives in Ramat Beit Shemesh. She's the proud mother of a lot of my grandchildren. But I do have 2 children who live b'chutz la'aretz, and they are also have given me grandchildren, and my mom lives b'chutz la'aretz. But my husband and I really, really do want to make Aliyah. We attempted it at one point. We lived in Rishon LeZion for a short while. Had we lived someplace else, maybe I would have been happier and I would have stuck it out. But he came back. He had taken his CPA exam before we left America. And we left immediately after, and then we spoke to my mom on the phone, and she told us that he had passed like 3 out of 4 parts or something or other, and he said, "Oh, well, I've got to go back and take the other one," and we went back, and he took the other one, and that was the end of us coming back over here. But we really do consider. Actually, last year we researched the Nefesh B'Nefesh site, and we said, well, we have a couple of, criteria. We need to find a place where there are Americans or Anglos. I did not want to be in a sole Hebrew community, Israeli community. We need to have a place that has retirees, because I did not want to be everybody's Saba and Savta. We need to have a place that has a Temani Minan, because for good or for bad, my husband is Temani. And we plugged that into the Nefesh B'Nefesh site, and they came up with this place, Meitar. I contacted somebody in Meitar, contacted somebody there, and we actually went there last summer, actually it was, because it was in Shabbat Shabbat Tammuz. She said, is it okay to come on a fast day, because that's the only day I had free? I said, no problem, we're not doing anything anyway. We loved the place, except as we were driving there, my husband was going, La kachtoti at sofa olam, so.
Did you met in the Sinai?
We met in Sinai, though. Yes, we did meet. But we fell in love with Meitar. So if anybody knows a place like Meitar, a little bit closer to the Markaz, we're moving there. So I'm open to suggestions. We don't want to live. My husband is from the Krayot. He does not want to. Yeah, my husband is from the Krayot. Rosh Hashanah, yeah. But there's no Americans there. He has relatives in Rosh Hashanah. He's from the Krayot, so he doesn't. Yerushalayim to him is we always didn't get married because I wanted to live in Yerushalayim and he wanted to live in Haifa. And I said, Haifa? Jews live in Haifa? And we ended up in Rishon LeZion for a while. In the midway, we measured it out. So I don't want to live in a city. I want to, retire to someplace that's quieter, that's, more. He does not want to live beyond the Green Line, otherwise we would have been in the Gush. My son learned in the Gush, when he did his, year abroad, and we, were great there. But in any event, so if somebody has a suggestion, no cities, no Me'evala Kava Yarok, and all
try
those
Uganda.
Okay, Uganda. So that's it. But we heard that Krishesh is kind of being built up to Meitar, so maybe that'll convince everyone.
I know Meitar very well. It's nice. I didn't know there was a name there.
Yeah,
I knew there were
maybe we can all move to Meitar, they'll be happy.
David, do you want to say a few words instead of reading the other? No.
I think it's late.
Okay. Well, everybody will hear David's words on tape. He was really brilliant. I must admit, he was brilliant. Miriam.
Okay. First question was getting to Israel. I decided to come on Aliyah when I was a sophomore in high school, as a result of Amnon Haramati's the impression that he gave of being such an avid Zionist?
He's still there.
Do as I say.
He actually finally retired right before my
He was very impressive. I remember he used to leave class in the middle with his face distorted in pain, and we had all kinds of theories
That's in the book. It's in
about
memory.
why he couldn't be in Israel because he couldn't get the medical treatment. We had a million different reasons why he couldn't. Anyhow, he spoke once about what turned out afterwards to be Achot Briut HaTzibur, but I understood it to be a social worker would go to the different ma'abarot and help people, and I said, I'm going to be a social worker in Israel.
By then, there were no ma'abarot.
And I never really checked that decision afterwards. So I kind of focused my life on that, and I came when I finished college. It took me many years to admit that that was also the one legitimate way to leave home single. But had you asked me, then I came for only ideological reasons. And then in my first or second job here, I was a juvenile probation officer, and I had a supervisor. And we were talking, and she says, and so what made you come? And I tell this story, and she burst out laughing. She says, Ani bat kitata shel Dina Haramati. She said, the only reason they came on Aliyah, they came to America, was because he was a high school teacher. Everybody else in his shechva achieved a lot more than he did, and he was embarrassed to stay in Israel on the level that he was in. And she burst my bubble. And I'm still here, and he's still there.
Okay for you.
Stories about principals. I don't have any stories about Eliach. One story about Zippy was I being in the C class with the best group. Dennis Prager was always a character.
Wow.
And he had multi-talents. And he always annoyed all the teachers and whatever. And he was in the D class, huh?
See.
I don't know.
See how much it really
And
meant.
he had a picture of Zippy picking his nose. Remember?
I once caught him. I walked into the office and he was reading a newspaper.
And it was in his briefcase. Now, Dennis spent most of high school reading the newspaper or teaching himself Russian.
Mm-hmm.
And it was always under his desk. So Zippy walked into the room, and he quickly hid whatever he had, and he goes over to his briefcase. And we all know that this photograph is in the briefcase. And he opens it, but somehow he misses it. Somehow he
I was
misses
very
it.
good friends with you, and you never told me the story.
I'm sorry. The other principal who I had contact with was with Mr. Braverman, that I was one of the people who decided to go and light Friday night candles for him for, I don't remember how long. We did it for over a year. Every Friday night we would go. What? With Toulouse.
Liba.
We went as a group. We went as a group to light candles for him, and he appreciated it tremendously, and it was such a small gesture that we did, and I remember that as something very special. Other anecdotes?
What about us hitchhiking together in Israel?
But that was here. That
That was
has
here.
nothing to do with
We're
Flatbush.
talking about Israel.
Thanks, man.
Barry, can I just have to add one sentence, because I think I opened the
You're
shooting
the president.
season.
You're the president, so.
No, on Rabbi Lieberman. I just want to say that I worked with him years later. He was the headmaster at Hafter.
Mm-hmm.
And we as students saw him one way. But I want to tell you that he
I
was
have
a
no
tremendous human being, very, very nice person, so we shouldn't give our spouses the impression that we're talking
I
about,
have no
especially
doubt.
since he's up there listening, you know.
I have no doubt that he is
The
spending
Syrian
time.
community
You know,
in
his-
Brooklyn really regards him.
Yeah.
as a teacher. They're
And you know
right.
his son was killed at Kibbutz Yosef a few years ago.
Yeah.
Esther, your turn.
You know what? I'll pass.
Adina, your turn.
Wait a second.
Give her a hard time.
I'm looking at the 43-minute mark, so
Okay, I have a few stories. One is with Marganese in high school. I don't remember what grade we were in, but he was teaching us history, and he was talking about the Tkufa, that there were Jews living in Alexandria at the same time that there was a Beit HaMikdash, and they had like a mini Beit HaMikdash in Alexandria. And I raised my hand and I said, I guess we spoke in Hebrew, but
Yes, we can.
I said to him, I don't understand. There was a Beit HaMikdash and Jews were living not far away in Alexandria. And he looked at me. I don't think I was more than 16. He says, well, it's not exactly the same thing. But we have a state of Israel and you're all living in America. So why are you asking this question? Now, that's not the reason that I moved to Israel. There were many influences in my life. But it really
All of a
made
sudden,
an
there's a
impression
different,
on me. Like,
there's a different
we
truth
have a
out
state
there.
of Israel. We just have to get on a plane and come here. And how, could we not? Now this is a little bit of a sad story about Mo Radinsky. David and I were on sabbatical 12 years ago in Houston, Texas. And the shul we went to, there was a retired rabbi there, and his name was Rabbi Radinsky. But I didn't in any way make a connection, Mo Radinsky, and he invited us for a meal, Shabbat, and we were sitting in his living room, and there's a picture of Mo Radinsky on his coffee table. And all of a sudden, Simon Nafal, Radinsky, I didn't in any way put the connection. And I recognized Mo, and I said to Rabbi Radinsky, I said, why do you have a picture of Mo Radinsky? I couldn't,
Dumb question.
So no, I still couldn't figure out.
Simone was still up
there. Simone was still up there.
That's another pull punches.
And he says, he was my baby brother. He says he was my baby brother. And what do you, and I said, I went to school with him, and he said, well, tell me, what do you remember about him? I remembered puns. And then he was very smart, and then he was very cynical. That I remember. He was very cynical. But he was so happy to hear that it was he was 19.
Yep.
19 or 20.
Freshman year.
He was very young.
Naomi.
Okay, I'm questioning whether I went to the same school.
Oh, okay.
I have no memories, I don't remember.
You were taking notes. I can vouch for that. You were always taking notes.
I have no recollection of any of this. I had a great high school experience. I remember being very happy.
Yeah.
Other than that, I'll pass.
Doing it to me. You can do it already.
Yeah, right.
Sorry.
I spoke to you about this.
Oh,
But they
Oh, come on, Shira. 2 minutes.
Come on, Shira, give us a little bit of a recap. No,
It's in the book. Mark.
Read the book. Read the book.
Mark.
All right, so I have the first story about Flatbush, which isn't really about Flatbush, but it's almost about Flatbush. When I went to elementary schools, I went to progressively less and less from schools. I started out in a Yiddish-speaking place, Shmuel in Brooklyn. Then I went to Eitz Chaim. Then I went to Ohel Moshe, and then in Ohel Moshe somehow I heard Flatbush, and I heard it was a good school, and I wanted to go there. And when the teachers and the principals heard about it, one by one, they took me aside. They sat me down. The principal of Ohel Moshe was Ramaphos, and he appointed various other teachers, and they all sat down and they tried to convince me not to go to Flatbush because it was a terrible, place, and I was going to, go off the derech. So I went to Flatbush.
You went off the dare.
Went off the derech.
You didn't ask.
The other choice was BTA. So,
As far as Israel goes, I had a very, very long aliyah. The first time I was in Israel, I was 6 years old. we came to visit my grandfather.
Come by boat?
By boat, 16 days it took. My grandfather was living here, and my mother, who had not seen him since the war, they were survivors, they'd been separated in Hungary, they came to visit my grandfather. And he was living in a little, half of a little asbestos, prefabricated thing, and it was, for me it was fine. I mean, I didn't, it seemed fine to me. So that was the first time I was in Israel. And at that time I was still going to Ber Shmuel, so I didn't know any Hebrew. And I only knew Yiddish, besides English. So, but everybody I spoke to spoke Yiddish. All the bus drivers, everybody knew Yiddish. Occasionally there was a Sephardi I'd run into, but they were like negligible in terms of the people I ran into. So that was my first visit to Israel. The second time I came to Israel to visit my grandparents when I was 12, I came with my brother, just the two of us. And my parents, my father, they're both survivors from Europe, and they had an idea of how people should dress when you go on a plane, because going on a plane was a big deal in those days. So he bought us suits and ties, and we even had little fedoras with feather. And mine was green, I remember. And that's what we wore on the plane. What my father told us to wear. And we got to Israel. We finally got to my grandparents' house, which was then in Tivon, Kiryat Tivon. They moved up. And I remember there were other little kids around. And all I heard was Charlie Chaplin, Charlie Chaplin. And I didn't know what they were talking about until. And then, so we stayed there the whole summer. And during the summer, we acclimated. So at the beginning of the summer, I came with a suit and a tie and a hat with a feather. And during the summer, progressively, things got more and more informal. And by the end of the summer, I was wearing a kippah, no shirt, no shoes, just little khaki shorts, and we have pictures of that. I was running around, and people thought I was a Moroccan. I was dark, skinny. So that was my second visit to Israel. And the third time I came was later on when I was 18. I think it was junior year abroad. I think it was, I think it was that year. Yeah. And what happened then was I'd become born again, so I was wanting to go to Mir Yeshiva, and so on. And that was when I really decided that I wanted to live here, and like Oren and other people, a lot of people in that year, the junior year abroad, we all decided we were going to move here. And for some it happened right away, and for others of us it didn't happen right away. And finally we made Aliyah 5 years ago. Our kids live here, Esther's and my kids and grandchildren, and I'm very happy to be here.
How did your kids get here? Came with you?
They came with us when we got divorced. She took both of them.
Rina.
Okay, well, I want to continue. You mentioned Ohel Moshe, Yeshiva of Moshe.
Yeah.
I also came from Yeshiva of Moshe. I must have left when you came. In 6th grade, I transferred to Yeshiva of Flatbush.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I came.
And that's why I don't know you, because Michael Hoffert was there, and Arthur Murr was.
Harry
was
Rosenbach.
there.
Harry
Harry
Rosenbach.
Rosenbach.
Isaac
yeah.
Nachbar.
Isaac Nachbar.
Isaac Nachbar, a few others. Abe Zeriker, that I can remember off the top of my head. And I landed in Yeshiva of Flatbush, and of course stayed there through high school. And I think that the influences about Israel were just permeating everything in my life, at home and in Flatbush. And the first time that I came to Israel was when Oren came the second time, well, not maybe not the second time, Zimriya, the 70 trip, and we were placed, we slept in the center of Tel Aviv, and we toured the country, and I said, hey, I can live here, why can't I live here? Why not? I had some relatives also. So I came back twice as a tourist the next year. Once to visit my sister who was here for her junior year, who roomed with Amy Persky. And the second time I came was with my father when he led a group. And the third time I came as an Ola Chadasha. During that year, between Zimriya and the time of my Aliyah, I was thinking all the time in Brooklyn. Number one, I gotta get out of the house, I'm old enough. Number two, I want to move to Israel. How am I going to do that? And lo and behold, I see a pamphlet lying around the house because we got mail from all kinds of Zionist organizations. And there was a pamphlet from the Jewish Agency that had programs for Americans, and one of them was a program for a BSW at Bar Ilan. I said, perfect. I applied from New York, got accepted, was on my way, went to a Ma'on Olim just for singles in Yafo. So it was a great social life there also. And I was in Bar Ilan, didn't have to pay a penny or a shekel or certainly not a lira. And I even had a roommate who was in the same program with me, and everything went very, very easy for me because right from the social work program I was put into a job, never had to look for a job. Certainly there were no resumes in that day. And I got married, I lived in Cholon, and I felt very comfortable and I felt at home. And even though I'm saying all these details, I'd just like to say there's only one reason to come to Israel, and that's because we're Jewish, and all the rest is commentary.
Thank you. Shady?
I'm so saturated with all these stories. Well, in light of what Rena just said, I was her mailbox when she was in Israel that time.
Oh yeah, well, a certain contact, yeah.
Because her parents weren't that approving of that particular relationship, and so the mail used to come through my house.
But I still moved to Israel because I wanted to live in
I-
Israel.
Absolutely. And then you made your Rida and made Aliyah again. So
Yeah.
Anyway, so we came in 1989. We did not plan to move to Israel, sorry. I loved Israel always. My house was very pro-Israel. My father and I used to speak Hebrew every Shabbos. He was European, but that was like a thing. And my husband was not in business. The Israelis that he came across in America were not people that he really wanted to live with. And so it was very far from our thought that we were going to move to Israel. But Hashem works his own magic. We were living at that point in Morristown, New Jersey, and we had 3 daughters, and for various reasons, not necessary to go into them all, we decided to try it. I don't want to do any commentary on that. And it turned out that our first year in Israel, actually, my husband was able to retire at a very young age, and we were able to, our cost of living was equal to the cost of tuition in America the previous year. So that was a very nice side effect. And we've never looked back. My son was born in Israel on the evening of our 25th reunion. Sorry I couldn't attend. And we're, thank God, all my children, after many travels back and forth, all live here. All my grandchildren are here. And thank God, this is definitely the right place. And my Flatbush story. So it was the freshman year of high school, and we had this new English teacher. Who you remember?
Mrs. Jaffe.
Mrs. Jaffe.
Yes.
The crybaby.
She was my customer at writing.
She told me, you know what,
I met
loved
her
her.
husband.
So
And
she
he's
was
a millionaire. She's the same thing. She did not report to Flatbush.
Mrs.
I don't blame her.
She was, I think this was her first teaching job.
Yes, it was.
And if the kids were talking in class or they were being chutzpahdik or whatever, she would start to cry. And like this was like putting fuel on the fire. We're making her cry. This is so cool. And she'd leave the room every once in a while, run to the bathroom, come back.
She once caught me, I would mark down how many times she said yes.
Yeah, I remember that.
She was, but I didn't
So
tell her.
anyway,
She
so
just
I
saw
was
her.
sitting, the way the classroom was set up then was that the door to the classroom was in the back of the room. That was the entrance to the classroom. I was sitting in the back row, and I was a good little girl, so I was just reading my book or doing whatever it was I was doing, writing notes to my friends. I wasn't disturbing the class, but I certainly wasn't paying attention. And all of a sudden, I'm sitting, the door is here, And I'm sitting there, first seat near the door. All of a sudden, I find myself in my chair all the way at the other end of the room at the window. Mr. Bravman had come in. And he just threw me with my chair all the way to the other end of the room. And I'm like in shock. And he bends down to me and says, I would expect this of other people, but not of you. And he walked out. And I don't know, but ever since then, I have never read in the back of a classroom of Mrs. Jaffe.
I remember during Mrs. Jaffe's exams, we would all sit in clusters,
Mhm.
and one day the back door, Zippy walks in, and he goes, "What's going on in this room?" And she goes, "They're taking an exam."
The one other thing from Flatbush is that, you know, in living in Israel, there are very few Americans who have a decent Hebrew. Fact. No matter how many years. And I've been in all kinds of different gatherings, and my family, my extended family is very Haredi. And I've been at various functions. And one time I was at a function and a woman was talking in very nice Hebrew, looking extremely fun. And so we started to talk to each other, and I said, I bet I know where you went to school. And she said, where? Flatbush.
She was speaking.
And just keep it quiet. So that's, so I got a lot out of it, but it was interesting. Bye, next.
Sherry.
Okay. I'll tell you the reason that we moved to Israel, and it was because when I was 10, I came to Israel with my parents, my brother, and they mixed up our tickets and they put us in first class. And I was sitting next to Golda Meir.
Wow.
And my parents said, get her autograph. I said, who is she? and she's important, get her autograph. And so I started to speak with her, and she said, do you speak Hebrew? Can. And she said, well, if you speak Hebrew, then you should really move to Israel. And I said, well, I can't because I have an American accent. She said, I have an American accent. And what could be better than what I do? So 50 years later, we decided to move.
Sherry, how old were you?
10.
That's cool,
That is a real story. That's one of your
That was the best story. Excuse me, people. I had an excellent English teacher at some point in Flatbush. What was her name?
Mrs. Mann.
Murdoch?
No, Mrs. Mann. Because Novell was crazy.
She was crazy,
Yeah.
but she told us great
But she don't
stories.
speak
Yeah.
English.
She was so insane.
Jenny.
Jenny Novell.
Mrs. Mann.
So I was
Mrs. I couldn't remember the name. She was an excellent English teacher.
I want to end this all with since Miriam, I want to segue into Miriam's Jenny story. So in the junior year of class, we're sitting in the class, and she gave us 16 topics to write about. 16th topic was a letter to the teacher. So I wrote a letter to the teacher, and I wrote what all of us felt about Mrs. Novell.
I'm holding you upside down.
It doesn't matter. And that night, my father gets a call from Zippy, and he said, I want to, he tells us what happened, whatever it was, and he said, you better write a letter of apology. So I'm in the class today, a letter of apology. She comes in with a pillbox hat, with a purse, ready to leave. Zippy comes in, gives us mussar, whatever it was. I'm there bawling my eyes out, whatever it is, I don't know, thrown out of class, letter, whatever it was. So I give her the letter, whatever. His class is over. Started to walk out. Jerry Wozentowski belts me on the back. Barry, you're a real man. That's exactly. And since then, we've been the best of friends in all these years. That's how Jenny started.
I want to give two Jenny stories. One, she came into class. She was wearing a pink dress. All the buttons were open except one. And either you or Judy, if I don't remember that, one of the two of you went up very quietly to say, Mrs. Novell, your dress is, and she said, my dress is open? My buttons. She was really insane. A second story is they called, we had to write book reports. Joseph Telushkin was called on.
Oliver Wendell Holmes. He never read the book.
He never read the book, and he didn't have a word
Nothing.
on
And as
his
everyone
thing.
came into the class, he said, just give me one sentence. And then what
And
she
he
said,
and one of the principals was there. It must have been Zippy, and he stood there with this board, a clipboard, and a blank piece of paper, and he gave an excellent book report, as only Joseph knew how to speak. The problem was they said it was so good they wanted a copy of it. And then he had to figure out what to do.
So he became a writer.
That would have been his first publication.
I have a Jenny story too, which is her story, that she told us. That she was she was a young woman, she said I was once a young woman, and I took my first trip to Europe on the Queen Mary. And as we left the port, I was standing on the deck, and a young man, a nice looking young man, was standing next to me. And he says to me, one good thing, at least there are no Jews on this ship. And she says, and I turned to him, and I said, you're looking at one. And we spent the whole voyage together. And that was the
Love
end.
boat.
She married
She was also the one who gave, it must have been Joseph also, who gave him the paper in the C class that somebody in the A class had given him. The identical paper. The person in the A class got a 90.
copy from whom?
I don't remember. And the person in the C, and Joseph got a 70. Because she gave her grades
Based on the grade.
according to.
Yes, we do.
We had him. When? Junior year, we had him also. Secret, junior year.
I just don't remember how to
So just one brief story. We're in the freshman year,
I remember her she had
and
white hair. She looked like I don't remember.
throughout my 8th grades, I was not a Bucky in Gemara.
We
Gemara-
had a gay English teacher. That's what I remember. Mr.
Carmel?
Those days, that was.
He was a
Karen.
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 He was
a
So,
priest first.
He had been a priest.
He wasn't married,
So,
was he?
We're in the second term of the freshman year. Ladies, quiet. We're not in school now. One second. So we're in the second term of the freshman year. I'm in the blue cast. Elliot is sitting right in front of Mr. Fisher, and I'm sitting to the row right afterwards. Okay, Simcha Fisher. And my Gemara was not great, whatever it was. He's handing out the grades. This guy did it, and then I was the last one. So he said, "Ani rotzeh lomar lecha mashu al Talmid Benjamin Mandel." At which point I take a big breath, relaxation. Elliot looks at me and says, "Why'd you take a deep breath?" He said, "He's not going to insult me in front of the whole class." I got a 99. That was the one time in my life I got a 99. Now, a few weeks before that, I learned a little bit of Gemara with my grandfather, who spoke no Hebrew and I spoke no Yiddish. My cousin, who was locked out of Kingsway Jewish Center, so he taught me Nach, didn't speak Gemara at all. They took credit for my 99. But years later, I realized I had insight. And that's how I became a social worker. I realized years later I had insight. That was the story. So we could go on forever, but we can't. We have a cake to eat. We have schmoozing to continue, whatever you want to. I can't tell you what a thrill this has been. The plan is this and the CD or the DVD that was taken from the reunion in New York is going to be put together. That's my next task, whatever it was, or whatever it will be. When I met Rabbi Eliach in December, and I invited him to the reunion, he said, fine, showed me his book. Maybe you want to give out the book to the classmen? By all means. He said, so what are you going to do? I mean, Rabbi Eliach I never had him as a teacher. I had him as principal, of course. So he didn't remember what class I was in. So I said, now I know what I'm doing from May 16th. It was a very big honor. And I have finished translating the book. He was so pleased, and I met with him afterwards, and he spoke to us at the reunion. So part of what he spoke will also be on the DVD. I apologize again for the lack of identifications. but now we know who everybody is, so it's not really important. Anyway, so we know each other. Enjoy the memory books. Please keep in touch with each other. Right after Sukkot, we're starting a project for a reunion after Sukkot here in 2018. We're going to try to get a place up north for a long weekend from Wednesday night through Sunday. Adina is going to be on the committee already. David's on the committee. Arthur Green's going to be on the committee. You're all going to be called to be committee members, whether you like it or not. But before we all go downstairs, I want to take a group picture of the graduates. We have the banner here that I brought in from New York, that I made up in New York. So please, let's just join together for a few minutes. Take a picture. We can come downstairs and have the cake, etc.
We need to thank Barry.
Oh.
For putting this together, and pushing it, and bringing everybody here, making sure that everybody came as best as he could.
Where is Marty?
He wrote yesterday he couldn't come.
But
Somebody came up.
he's done a tremendous job with Marty and with Herschel Dutton, with every last
Marty
one.
lives in Israel too?
Yeah, Ramot.
Who is Marty?
I think of Ramon.
All right.